I feel so fortunate to be in Kentucky and being a rural sociologist. Kentucky's rural areas has a little bit of everything. Being in Kentucky, I get a taste of almost every kind of rural there is. We have recreation destination areas, we have mining areas, we have agriculture areas, we have places that have more manufacturing, we have different kinds of agriculture, from specialty agriculture or cattle and calves to some of the row crops. You've got not just coal mining in eastern Kentucky, you also have surface mining like gravel in the western part of the state, thoroughbreds, floriculture, mushrooms. I mean, so to be in Kentucky, I don't have to leave the state, and I get a chance to go in very different kinds of rural Americas. That makes it more challenging, but also more interesting. I'm Julie Zimmerman, and I am the Konauer Professor of Rural Sociology in the Department of Community and Leadership Development at the University of Kentucky, and I'm also a faculty member in the Department of Sociology at the University of Kentucky. I was introduced to the history of rural sociology as a graduate student through Olaf Larsen, who for a long time was our oldest living past president. He was 3 months shy of being 108. And so everything I learned through him, and I realized he had shared with me these stories. It's a very complex, complicated history, but it's also a history that comes alive for me. So it's not just dusty books on a bookshelf. Through Olaf, I've met some of these people. I didn't know who they were at the time. I was just a brand new graduate student who was wandering around going, who, what, huh? So to me, these are real people. And so learning about this just helps bring alive the stories and fills in things around the stories that I had learned through Olaf. And then as historian, I like sharing those as part of my role for the Rural Sociological Society, is to then make that history consumable, if you will, and interesting. Being both rural and a sociologist, it really feeds into everything that I do. So, for example, as a sociologist, I'm very aware that when we're talking about numbers and data, and be it census data or data from any kind of agency, publicly available data that's out there, is the realization that numbers don't speak for themselves, right? Somebody's making decisions about what's being counted, how it's being counted, how it's being portrayed, what number do you put first, what number do you put second. And so understanding how things like our society's values, norms, and how those change over time has changed how we look at and how we understand data. Being a rural sociologist, not just a sociologist, is also important because we think of all the neat internet tools we have today, but we often forget that there's a rural digital divide. And that, so if you go and look at my website, there are no bells and whistles. There's no fancy mapping, there's no fancy anything, because I want everybody in every county to be able to access that data. Even if you still have dial-up, and there are people who still have dial-up internet access, or you can't afford a more recent laptop than one that's 10 years old. You might not be able to run these more fancy websites. They're certainly exciting to look at, but without that equal access, you can't access the data. And so I want people to be able to access the data. 55% of my time is working with extension and working with data, secondary data. Through that, I'll put together profiles for every county in the state on different topics. Kentucky by the Numbers is a lot about data in real time. Things that are accessible and usable for extension agents, although anybody can access it and use it. But I also do trainings around how to find data, how to use data, what to watch out for. I've got short publications, no longer than 4 pages, explaining things around data. And I do talks in classrooms even about how to use data, how to find it, what to watch out for, etc. The other parts of my time have to do with doing research. And so some of my recent research projects have been, I did a cost of living study. Everybody thinks it costs less to live in a rural area. I did a study about a decade earlier, and so we did a restudy, and the answer is still the same. No, it doesn't necessarily cost less to live in a rural area in Kentucky. That article is called The Enduring Price of Place, and that's open access, so anybody can access it and read it. Working on another project on student perceptions of rural America, and that's with Allie Meyer, who's in our department. So what we're doing is just looking at how students' perceptions and ideas about rural America change during the course of a module that we developed for a class. And then the rest of my time is done doing historical research. The most recent research project is on the hidden history of race, racism, and social justice in rural sociology. So that part of my research dovetails with my work as the historian for the Rural Sociological Society. I think some of the most amazing parts come when I'm doing historical work and I'm able to locate something that's long been forgotten. As we go into this next generation and these next centuries where we're thinking a lot more about these issues, that we need to be more aware about our own history. The good stuff that we need to remember, but also the bad stuff. Not all the stories are unicorns and rainbows, but we need to remember those as well. The 4 books that I've written, that I've been involved with, the first 2 were a pair, they were a companion. And so it was documenting the history of that first unit in the federal government devoted to sociological research. Before, this was in the 90s, so we got a late 80s, early 90s, remember where computers were at that point. People still did bibliographies. And so the first book is a bibliography of over 1,500 different citations, most of which were keyworded that I read them and did the keywords for. And then we have the companion book that tells the actual history. The next book, Opening Windows onto Hidden Lives, builds off of that history of that unit. In doing all of those, reading all those pieces the unit existed from 1919 to 1953. It was the Division of Farm Population and Rural Life. In doing that, I kept finding that they were documenting women's lives. And this was long before the women's movement in the 60s and 70s. And so I was always fascinated with why were these guys documenting women? This was very unusual for the time. So that became the next book, Opening Windows on the Hidden Lives. The 4th book is A Century of Scholarship and Service, and that's the centennial history of the first Department of Rural Sociology in the nation. In extension, I think a project that really illustrated why I do, what I like about what I do, was putting the data around COVID-19 together. Sometimes today we forget where we were at in the beginning. We were all learning together, how to count something, what to count, what is in, what's out. All of those decisions are being made in real time. And we're also seeing the impact. And it just became really clear that our agents needed to know or be a source of information for their communities of the extent to which they had populations at risk for some of the worst outcomes. And so in a matter of a few weeks, I had a student helping me, and we put together an issue of Kentucky by the Numbers. Being there in the moment and being able to be of help at that was something where we needed data to make informed decisions. So I think for COVID, for my extension program, that really was the moment that had, I think, impacted and had really illustrated the meaning for me